U.S. imposes sanctions on Russian oil companies after strikes on Ukraine kill 7. Renewed Russian attacks, following the apparent collapse of a planned Trump-Putin meeting, show that a negotiated solution to the war remains distant. Updated. October 22, 2025 at 6:47 p.m. ED. Today at 6:47 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. 9 minutes. Summary. 575. President Donald Trump meets with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in the Oval Office of the White House on Wednesday, October 22. Salwan George / The Washington Post. By Michael Birnbaum, Jacob Bogage, Lizzie Johnson, Robin Dixon, and Natalia Abakumova. In a move reflecting the Trump administration's waning patience with Russian President Vladimir Putin, the Treasury Department on Wednesday imposed sanctions against two of Russia's largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. Get concise answers to your questions. Try Ask the Post AI. The department cited Putin's lack of serious commitment to a peace process to end the war in Ukraine in a statement announcing the measures, which came after overnight Russian attacks on Ukraine that killed 7 people, including 2 children, and the apparent cancellation of a planned meeting next week between President Donald Trump and Putin in Hungary. Wednesday's sanctions cut off the Russian firms from American banking systems and financial institutions, essentially barring them from operating in U.S. dollars. Violators, including foreign financial institutions, can be subject to stiff penalties, including cascading sanctions. Individuals can be subject to criminal prosecution. These are tremendous sanctions. These are very big, Trump said in the Oval Office during a meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who organized a last-minute trip to the White House to shore up support for Ukraine. Those are against their 2 big oil companies, and we hope that they won't be on for long. We hope that the war will be settled. Follow Trump's second term. Follow. The latest sanctions elicited praise from Ukrainian officials and Ukraine's allies. The sanctions are relatively big, said Latvian Foreign Minister Biba Braze. Both are systemic for Russia's oil industry. And the very step matters, and the obvious coordination with European allies. The European Union on Wednesday announced it would imminently impose its own sanctions on Russia, including a ban on the import of liquefied natural gas. It's a very significant action because it's the first use of sanctions under the Trump administration and hits Russia where they are most vulnerable. Russia launched an overnight attack, killing several people in and around Kyiv on October 22, just hours after a Trump-Putin summit in Budapest was suspended. Video, Reuters. Russia's overnight strikes came just hours after a meeting planned for next week between Trump and Putin was scrapped, at least for the near future. Trump told reporters in the Oval Office on Tuesday that his meeting with Putin would be postponed so as not to waste his time following indications that Russia and Ukraine were still too far apart to strike a peace deal. More than 400 drones and 28 missiles were launched, many slamming into cities across Ukraine, from Kyiv to Zaporizhzhia to Odessa. Attacks on the electrical grid led to emergency outages in most of Ukraine's regions, leaving civilians without power as temperatures drop. The regions most left in the dark continue to be those closest to Russia, including Chernihiv in the north and Sumy in the east. The suspended meeting in Hungary marked another abrupt turn in Trump's public comments on the war, which in recent weeks have bounced from mulling over selling deep-strike Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine to a sudden cessation of pressure on Moscow after a phone conversation last week with Putin to, now, a chill in relations between the United States and Russia. The idea of Tomahawks seemed to especially alarm the Kremlin, with Putin calling Trump just a day before a White House meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. After the call, Trump dropped the talk of new missiles and urged Ukraine to give up territory for a deal. He also, however, called for freezing the lines on the battlefield, angering Russia. Russia rejected Trump's call for an immediate ceasefire Tuesday. The freeze in fighting, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said, went against what he said was decided between the two countries in August in Alaska. If we just stop, it means forgetting the root causes of this conflict, which the American administration clearly understood, Lavrov said, adding that it would leave Nazis in charge of Ukraine. Russia continues to do everything to weasel out of diplomacy, Zelensky said in a statement Tuesday night. As soon as the issue of long-range capabilities for us, for Ukraine, became less immediate, Russia's interest in diplomacy faded almost automatically. The Kremlin, which has frequently resorted to nuclear saber-rattling to try to deter Western support to Ukraine, also announced that Putin led a planned training exercise of Russia's strategic nuclear forces Wednesday, which included the launch of ballistic missiles. Publicly, Russia said planning for the summit was still underway. The foreign ministry was carrying out Putin's orders to work on the details of preparations for a meeting, including such issues as, although Trump has characterized Russia's conditions for peace as keeping Ukraine out of NATO and territorial demands, or property as he has termed it, and has attributed the difficulties in settling the war to bad blood between Putin and Zelensky, Moscow's core demands go much further. AI icon. These include setting the stage to remove Zelensky and his administration, stripping Ukraine of a substantial military, forcing Ukraine into close political and economic ties with Russia, denying Ukraine the right to join any alliances in the future, and making Russian an official state language. Russian analyst Vladimir Pastokov wrote on Telegram that Putin managed to persuade Trump to put the cart before the horse when he got him to abandon pressure for a ceasefire at the Alaska summit. When Trump reversed his position, Moscow exploded, and this reaction is completely logical and predictable. But he said Russia's insistence that the Zelensky administration consisted of Nazis indicated its true position. Lavrov's statement that a ceasefire without addressing the root causes of the conflict would leave most of Ukraine under Nazi rule sheds light on the essence of the disagreement between Putin and Trump and helps explain what is happening in the negotiations, he said. Mikhail Rostovsky, a political columnist for the pro-Kremlin tabloid newspaper Moskovsky Komsomolets, wrote Tuesday that Moscow has no reason to agree to a simple ceasefire. Trump's call to stop fighting doesn't suit Putin, who needed to gain time to push Zelensky even further into the corner. Moscow doesn't plan to make any unilateral concessions. And this approach stands in stark contrast to what Trump wants, which is to end the war as quickly as possible no matter how, so he could win a Nobel Peace Prize. In his Tuesday statement, Zelensky said he believed Ukraine's ability to strike deep into Russia, threatening the logistics of the Kremlin's war machine and incapacitating parts of its energy sector, could hold the indispensable key to peace. AI icon. The greater Ukraine's long-range reach, the greater Russia's willingness to end the war, Zelensky said. The discussion on Tomahawks turned out to be a major investment in diplomacy. We forced Russia to reveal that Tomahawks are precisely the card they take seriously. In another possible sign the Trump administration was escalating pressure on Russia, the Ukrainian military said Tuesday that it had used British-made Storm Shadow long-range missiles to strike a chemical factory in Bryansk, Russia. Because the Storm Shadow can contain U.S. parts, the Trump administration may have had to clear its use in Russia under U.S. law. It also uses U.S. targeting data. Trump denied on Wednesday a Wall Street Journal report that there had been such a policy change, calling it fake news.